You cannot look at any major entertainment business now and say, that's a really well-run company. When you're laying off thousands of people, that's not because you made good decisions. And in a world, and so I think it's been more than 10 years, but probably a long stretch of 20 years where interest rates have been basically zero. So money is essentially free. And so these people lived in a world where they just go and Netflix grew on borrowed money at 0%. And they borrowed it all. And they made all these TV shows that sit unwatched on their servers. And they're wondering what happened. And what really happened was these guys had too much money. They spent it building stupid companies. There is no reason on earth why the world needs, or economically rational choice would be to build Paramount Plus. Right? That's just dumb. We don't need Paramount Plus.
Welcome to the Unspeakable podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Daum. I don't cover the entertainment business too much on this podcast, but a little over a month ago, which seems like a long time ago now, I was reading and hearing about the end of the almost 6-month-long writer's strike in Hollywood and trying to make sense of some of the various issues therein, as well as just the ever-changing nature of the business of Hollywood more generally. And I decided to call up Rob Long. Rob was a writer and an executive producer on the legendary comedy series Cheers, and he went on to create and produce several other shows. He's also the creator of a decades-long commentary series about the entertainment business called Martini Shot, which was originally on public radio and is now hosted by Ankler Media. And he's written for the Wall Street Journal and lots of other publications, now writes regularly for commentary. I brought him in because I wanted to understand what the writer's strike was all about, and keep in mind that the actors are still on strike, and how much of it had to do with anxieties about AI. I also wanted to know why the business model of the last 10 years or so in Hollywood seems to be suddenly falling apart. So we talked about all of that. We also talked about the staggering financial success of the movie Sound of Freedom and why it wasn't released through the usual channels. And finally, how Rob managed to get hired on Cheers when he was 24 years old, and how you can do that too. Just kidding. Or maybe I'm not kidding. That's what vision boards are for. Just a note on this conversation. It was recorded on October 5th. That's what I mean when I say it was, it feels like a very long time ago now. So we may be referring to things in the past that are now more in the past than they were at the time. But this is nonetheless a conversation that continues to be relevant, and it's a great one. So here's Rob Long. Rob Long, welcome to The Unspeakable.
Well, thank you.
I'm really glad to have you here. I was thinking about this, and I actually, in 3 years of doing this podcast, I have not covered the entertainment industry really very much at all. I know.
It's the only subject there is, apparently.
I know. Especially I'm in Los Angeles now. I don't know what I'm thinking. God. It's strange because this show is about culture and society, and the absolute glue of that is the entertainment we consume. So I want to talk with you about a number of things, but I think I will start here. So last month, finally saw the end of a long writer's strike in Hollywood.
Right.
It's been going on since May. Is that right?
May 1, I think May 3 or 4, something like that. Early May. So it's the second longest.
Right. And the strike action was against the Trade Association for Film and Television Producers.
Right.
I'm sort of on the periphery of this business. I was in the Writers Guild for a brief shining moment of amazing health insurance. And I have some idea about what the issues were. But I think, like a lot of people on the outside, I don't quite understand what was at stake. You have been in the WGA for more than 30 years.
33 years.
33 years. That's the magic number. You've also been writing commentary on the business for almost that long, including now in the magazine Commentary.
Right.
So I want to ask, what did you make of the strike? And what did you think it was reflecting about the state of the entertainment business?
Well, I'm sort of a contrarian on this because, ordinarily I'm very skeptical about writers in general. I, being one, I think I know how irrational we can be. And the Writers Guild in general, the last strike we had, I didn't think was very wise. I didn't think it was very wise for us to do our action against the agents a few years ago.
The one before this, you mean?
Yeah, there was a strike in 2007, and then we all fired our agents for a new agency deal in about a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. So I'm not crazy about this, but then going into it, I was really impressed by the way that the Writers Guild leadership sort of focused in on issues that really matter to younger writers and writers just at the beginning, the first phase of their career, which is not traditionally what they've done. So the good news and the bad news, I think, is that the strike accomplished a big thing. I mean, about 80%, maybe 85% of everybody's crowing about how much this is going to cost, what this is going to mean. The Writers Guild leadership is saying, look at all this money we got from them. All that's true, but most of it is just in raising the minimum. So just basically everybody got a pay raise along the same scale that they always did. That's about 80% of the whole deal is a pay raise, which is great. But for the past 25 years, all those pay raises have been a little smaller, but they've been in a zero inflation environment. So we've maybe caught up to inflation. Maybe this a little on the upside of inflation, but it's still. I say basically to people, it's like everything you hated about show business, in April of 2023, you're really going to hate the same amount and the same things in November of 2023. The strike's not going to take those things away. It's still going to be a really uncertain business. It's really going to be hard. Most people aren't going to make it. Most people aren't going to get their own show on the air. Most people aren't going to get a job on a staff of a TV show that runs more than a year. More people are working now, and that's good, but that also means that more people are going to be not working who have worked. More people are going to have to be making tough decisions about leaving the business in the next 5-10 years.
Because they're paying people more? Wait, I want to understand
No. Just because the business is mercurial, because it's always feast or famine, because there are more people in it, and it's going to be contracting a little bit, and just there isn't going to be room for all those people. It gets, it's like Freakonomics. When they did that study of the mob, the mob's this terrible business unless you're the mob boss. If you're the mob boss, it's a fantastic business. But if you're just a little capo down there or you're a little foot soldier, it's terrible because you're always kicking money upstairs and you're never getting ahead. And that is sort of how it works in show business. People are in it because they love it and because they have a dream, and that love and that dream sustains them throughout mostly very low earning years and the promise and sometimes the optimistic and accurate prediction that they're eventually going to break it in and break it big, but it's often just numerically, statistically, not going to happen. And if the Writers Guild got every single thing it wanted without any compromise at all, if the studios just said, okay, fine, yeah, we signed this deal, done, no strike necessary, we'll do it all in 20 minutes, we agree, those things would still be true.
Mm-hmm. What percentage of people in the Writers Guild are actually working?
Well, that's a hard number more now than ever. I mean, and I think one of the good things about the deal that the Guild made is that it's kind of helped make sure that number is going to be slightly protected. It's hard to know how it's really going to shake out. They have sort of a minimum staffing requirements for certain shows at certain budgets for certain weeks. It's all really complicated about a pre-green room staff and a post-green room staff and all that stuff. I mean, a pre-green light staff and a post-green light staff. But it looks like that it looks like they're going to be more, and that there are going to be more people are going to be allowed to take their best shot at it. But
okay,
that's it.
Now, what do you mean by that? Because, well, first of all, I think people hear this and they say, well, according to what I heard, these writers are getting $20,000 a week, $50,000 a week, whatever it is. Why do they need a raise? So let's just start there. This is really basic stuff, but this is not an insight. This is not an industry show. So let's just kind of start there. What are people actually making?
Well, it's super complicated because it depends on who those people are. The agreement is called the minimum basic agreement, the MBA. And the minimum part of it is, okay, this is just what these companies will pay. That's the minimum they'll pay you. And there are certain things that you do, no matter who you are, you're going to get paid the minimum. So I create a show, which I'm technically a showrunner, right? So I write and create a show. If I create a show and it gets ordered, and I'm making a series out of it, and I write a script, an episode for a script of the show that I own, I'm going to get paid the Writers Guild minimum for a show of that length. for that exhibitor, right? And so will the story editor, the lowest, or the staff writer, or somebody lower on the rank. We all get paid the same to write a draft. But I'm the frickin' EP, executive producer, showrunner. So I get paid an additional big fee. I don't make my money on that. I make my money on my fee. And my fee is negotiated way outside the purview of the guild. That's my agent and my manager and people like that who yell and scream at business affairs and demand. If I'm a really good person at what I do, it's going to somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 an episode. If it's if I'm a superstar, it's a stratospheric number that nobody even pays because they pay the Greg Berlantes and the Shonda Rhimes. They pay them some insane amount on the over the top just to show up to work every day. If I'm a fledgling young producer and I've just broken in out of the staff and now I'm like writing drafts, but I'm also kind of technically a writer producer, I could, who knows, maybe somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 an episode. But that is entirely fungible and it's based entirely on what the marketplace will pay that writer under those circumstances at that time. So what's important to recognize is what the Writers Guild struck for and got was a deal based on minimums, and that shows you the problem, kind of the fissure in the Writers Guild, which is like it's not like a union. It's not like a union like any other union where everybody's kind of doing the same job and those job descriptions are really, really rigid. We have plutocrats in there. We have billionaires in there. We have people who get paid $200,000, $300,000 an episode. We have people who get paid $11,000 an episode. Every single one of those people, if they write one episode, they have their name on it, written by that episode on a TV show. They're going to get paid the Writers Guild minimum. But if they have a producer level credit or some other credit, they'll get paid another episodic fee on top of that. That's where people get rich, really.
Right. So what is the minimum right now?
I really honestly don't know. A half hour, I think it's somewhere in the high 20s, maybe it's $30,000 to write a half hour episode of half hour television. For broadcast, it's going to be less for streaming and less for cable. Broadcast television almost always pays you more. So for now anyway, so that number is going to be the ceiling.
Okay.
And then when it's rerun again on that network, so just say you write an episode of, I don't know, some CBS comedy. When it's rerun on that network that year, you get like 90% of that script fee again.
Wow.
And then the residuals go way down. They start going down and they go down really fast.
Okay, but if somebody is young, they're starting out, say they get hired on a show, they get in a room. So these are writers' rooms. Right. And we're going to talk about this new phenomenon, the mini room, which I know you've written about.
Yeah, the mini room.
Sounds kind of creepy. But are they getting, but like presumably it's not like every member of the staff is writing an episode every week. So how is that? Yeah. What would you make if you get hired? If you're like a young person and you get hired into a room, what kind of money are you likely to make for whatever period of time you're working on that show?
In today's world, you could write one episode, it's like these are shorter seasons now. I mean, broadcast TV is shrinking, so it's going to go away soon. So we're really talking about people who are working on on series that have maybe 10 episodes a season or sometimes 6 episodes a season. And so they're going to write one. If they're lucky, they'll write one script. I mean, if the staff is big enough, if you're on a series that has 6 episodes, and you don't write a draft, you don't write a script, an episode of that, you don't get paid. The Writers Guild minimum won't matter. What will matter is your weekly rate, and I don't know what the weekly rate is, but it's not a lot. I mean, it has been now a pattern for young writers to break in, and maybe they're on a show that does well, and they do 10 episodes or 12 episodes of that show for a year, and they get paid, maybe they make their weekly rate for production and pre-production, and they may make $75,000, $80,000 for that portion. And then they're under contract until the show is picked up again and it's sort of exclusive. So they can't really do anything. That's called span, which is another.
They can't work for another. They can't write on another show.
Yeah, they're on. And so sometimes that $75,000, $80,000 is going to last you a year and a half. Which is, I mean, I'm not running my nose down on it, but it's not like you're getting rich.
Right. Okay. So, all right. And now the conventional wisdom, or at least, the way I've heard people talk about this, is we have this glut of shows. We have streaming. I mean, you're talking about 6 episodes. You're talking about a streaming series. You're not talking about broadcast. Right. So like, this is a really simplistic framing, but okay. So we have suddenly all these streaming networks. We have a million shows. We can't even keep up with them. what has that done to the industry? Like what, because I know this is what you write about and this is what you talk about and this is what I'm trying to get a handle on. Like what has changed in the last, I don't know, 5 years? And what are we looking at going forward?
Well, I mean, traditionally, here's how it works in these contract negotiations, right? The writers are, dramatic and irrational, and they complain they're being, exploited by evil millionaires, right? Mr. Burns
Yes.
twirling his mustache in the tower.
Right.
But basically, the idea was that, okay, we don't have to be grown-ups because we're the writers. You have to be the grown-ups. So this underlying argument was always the rich, evil grown-ups running the business need to give us a bigger slice of the pie. But they're basically doing a good job growing the pie. The tacit understanding of every Writers Guild strike before then has been, things are great for you guys. We built that. You ran it. You made some good moves here in this business and grew it. We want our fair share. And this year is different. It's fundamentally the opposite, because this year it's, you guys are idiots. You have busted this business by being stupid. And now you want us to pay the price for that. And we're not going to do it. And there's a huge amount of truth to that. You cannot look at any major entertainment business now and say, that's a really well-run company. When you're laying off thousands of people, that's not because you made good decisions. And in a world, and so I think it's been more than 10 years, but probably a long stretch of 20 years where interest rates have been basically zero. So money is essentially free. And so these people lived in a world where they just go and Netflix grew on borrowed money at 0%. And they borrowed it all. And they made all these TV shows that sit unwatched on their servers. And they're wondering what happened. And what really happened was these guys had too much money. They spent it building stupid companies. There is no reason on earth why the world needs, or economically rational choice would be to build Paramount Plus, right? That's just dumb. We don't need Paramount Plus. The Paramount streaming service, right? It's so lazy. They spent so much money. They named everything Plus, right? There is no reason on earth why there needs to be there's an MGM Plus. There's an MGM streaming. This is bullshit. They don't need them. There's no reason on earth, actually, and I'm alone in this pretty much, that Netflix, terrible decision was to go raise money to make TV shows, because they thought, well, you have to make our own TV shows because nobody will sell us their TV shows to watch on Netflix if we don't make our own. That was their theory, which is a lie they told themselves, right? And we know it's a lie because Netflix is doing great with reruns. The number one show on Netflix this summer was Suits, reruns of Suits, a nearly 20-year-old show that was on USA Network like a million years ago.
Huh.
If I was like a Netflix shareholder, and the biggest show on this network was an old rerun, I'd be saying, why are we spending so much money making shows that nobody watches?
Have they really not? They make comedy specials. I'm trying to think. Yeah. I get it all jumbled up in my mind, but certainly there have been Netflix originals that have done well.
Yes, the argument isn't that their argument is that if we don't make them, they won't get made, and if they don't get made, they won't get sold to us, and if they're made by somebody else won't sell them to us, and that just isn't true. The history of show business is that people will always, if you have a barn, people are going to call you up and say, can I put on a show in your barn? That's what we do. And Netflix had a gigantic barn, and they decided, well, everybody wants to hang out with movie stars. Okay. So if you want to hang out with movie stars, you want to be a player, you want to have all you want to have all these celebrity heroes of yours at your house. Well, you got to be making movies, right? You can't just be the buyer. But in fact, being a buyer is a better, more economically sound position. And had Netflix just decided to be a buyer, then Paramount Plus would be selling things to Netflix. Then Hulu would be selling things to Netflix. Then, I don't know, Max or whatever. There would be, I understand that Apple TV is going to have their own network, and that Netflix is going to have their own network, and even Amazon will have their own network because it's huge. But why is anybody else? And you can see how bad they are, right? We already know. Everyone agrees. You don't know what's on TV. If you want to watch something, you have to Google it to know how to watch it.
That's not just
insane.
Me. Okay.
No, it's everyone. Okay. And then even when you Google it, you try to find it, it takes you about 20 minutes to find it. If you're if you use Apple, you have Apple TV, which I have, and you for some reason by mistake on that tiny little finger remote that they give you, you click the wrong search box. Like it's still a search box, but it's the wrong one. And you search for something, you get results from something that you don't own, or you get you don't get what you want. No one in the entire entertainment industry has any experience with consumer happiness or consumer experience. They don't have any experience with pricing. They don't have any experience running a platform, a tech platform. They don't have any experience doing any of the things they are now raising billions of dollars to do. It's like so dumb. Just do the thing you do. Like as opposed to Netflix that has all this experience running this giant platform. At a certain point, wasn't like 30% of all internet traffic at night in America was Netflix. Like they're good at that. Just do that, man. That's a hard job. Focus on that and trust me. Show business, the entertainment business is designed. People will be knocking down your door trying to sell you TV shows and movies.
You have called Netflix's decision to become a studio a crazy Silicon Valley screw up. Just talk more about that. Like it sounds like a bunch of businessmen, a bunch of business people from other industries basically came in and decided that they wanted to be Hollywood executives.
Yeah, look, everybody looks at Hollywood. Smart people. These are smart people, and they look at Hollywood. They say this can't be that hard. These people are overpaid and they are emotional weirdos and it can't be that hard. And so the arrogance from the outside, lately it's been from Silicon Valley, but before that it was in the giant conglomerates. I mean, Transamerica, giant insurance company, bought United Artists, and Coca-Cola, the world's most famous brand, bought Columbia TriStar. Sony, and they regret it, bought Columbia TriStar from Coca-Cola. It's always big companies always think they've got it all figured out. And they come and they realize, oh my God, this is a terrible business. Making movies and TV shows is a terrible business if you don't love it already, if you're not intoxicated by it already. So they had this arrogant idea that we're going to, and if people in show business felt that way too, oh my God, these guys are going to come from the Silicon Valley and they're going to impose all of their efficiencies on us. It's going to be miserable. And instead, they came to Silicon Valley and guess what happened? What always happens is that they went Hollywood. They ended up overspending on everything, and they bought themselves really nice houses in the Beverly Hills and Bel Air, and they had parties. And they said, "Oh, we really want is Oscars." And they went and they just spent money. Now, the problem with that is that interest rates were low enough that then everybody else spent money too, and it created this, streaming wars, which means everybody overspent. Everyone was hemorrhaging. No one knew what to do. And then the only way out of this for them really was a strike, right? A break for the circuit breakers to pop, which means that, in 30 days, 90 days into a strike, you get to force majeure all your existing deals if you want. You get to rethink all the things you've agreed to do. You get to get out of any deal you want. You get to recalibrate your entire business model, which is what they're doing now. Everybody's doing it now. There's a reason why Disney is thinking about how they're going to sell ABC. There's a reason why Netflix is already licensing more programming from other places. The thing they said they could never do, they wouldn't be able to do. Now they're going to do it. They're all now adding ads, an ad-supported tier on all these things. The thing they said they would never do, of course, now they have to do. They are at like a breakneck pace recreating show business in the 1970s. That's what's going to look like.
We're going to see Dick Van Patten's going to come back. And
we're going to... That show got like a 25
could
share.
Be worse. Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about AI because, again, from the outside, when we hear about the writer's strike and we hear about what they're concerned about, this comes up a lot. I don't know how big a concern this was in terms of the negotiations compared to what we actually hear about. But what is your take on that? Because I have heard everything from this is not a big deal, this is a moral panic, to they could literally they could use AI to program a writer's room and create 10 individual people with their own personal history and background and sensibility and temperament and write the same show with bots as human beings could write. So where's the reality here?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately it's three things. One, I think this is a much, much more urgent and real issue for the actors. So the Screen Actors Guild is still on strike. I think this is going to be a big deal for them. the original proposal, which was, I think may or may not be true that it was explicitly this, but the interpretation of the proposal was the studios told the actors, the Screen Actors Guild basically, okay, if you're a background artist, which is what we call extras, right?
Yeah, is that like a woke thing? Is it like it's a microaggression to say extra?
It's like when I started, you said extra, and a person who somebody who came in basically had a guest part on a show, like had 3 or 4 lines, 5 lines maybe. You call them a day player because you paid them by the day. Yeah, who was the day player we had last week? He was good. Let's bring that day player back. We just said day player. Actors hated it. And so then they just said, you have to call us co-star. We're a co-star. Which is ridiculous, right? But you got to do it. That's fine. We like our titles around here. Everybody, by the way, everybody in every studio is a vice president or a senior vice president or executive vice president. So I don't know why they're complaining. But all right. So then the background artist, which is the term for an extra. And it isn't easy to do, by the way. People say it's really easy, but I did it once. We were in the last episode of one of the last episodes of Cheers. The guys, the people running the show, like with me, the 3 other guys, we made ourselves extras at the bar, which you can see. We're in the back of the bar, and we are so terrible. We had a few drinks before the show, to be fair, but we are so terrible at it. And
how terrible could you be?
Because you're not doing it right. We look intense. We look like we're having a real conversation, which is not what you want.
You look like New Yorkers, not
Bostonians. We had to cut around ourselves. We like guys sitting there editing the show saying, "Can we cut me out? I'm terrible." So it's not easy. Anyway, the argument, the original, this is apocryphal, but I think this was the heart and the gist of the deal of the offer was the studio saying, look, and we'll pay you if you're a background artist, but we own you forever. We own your license, we own your likeness and everything we've got and all the digitized form of you and your face, and we have it forever. And we're not going to pay you anything for it. And it's like if you're this, the background artist, you're like, well, no, that's not how it works. You got to pay me, right? So they are, and we already know the technology is there to put your face on anything and doing anything, so that they have legitimate argument. The writers, I think, are a little worried about something that isn't going to happen anyway. Although in the New Deal there are strictures in place. One of them is that only a writer can be a writer. Like AI cannot write a script officially. So if the studio gives a writer a script written by AI and says, can you rewrite this? Which, by the way, is probably not going to happen, but that's the nightmare scenario. The writer who rewrites it is not rewriting a script officially, according to the Guild. They are writing a first and original draft.
Okay.
But they will get paid, they'll get paid the minimum. They'll get paid the Guild minimum to do that, which is a lot less than usually people get paid who are good at it and have a track record. So it's complicated hypothetical. To me, it's much, nobody in show business wants to get rid of writers. They don't. Like, no studio wanted.
I thought they've always wanted to get rid of writers.
No, the writers, the ones who come up with all the ideas and write the scripts. We're annoying, and we are, and we're irritating, and we talk too much, and we complain about everything. We spend too much money on lunch, but nobody wants to get rid of us. They're just trying to figure out a way to afford us and all of their mistakes, and that is kind of what drove the strike. So the result of the deal is complicated for AI for writers, but it pretty much protects them. I believe that the people who are the people who are in danger and have been in danger forever of automation, at least since they automated the assembly line, have been middle management. If I was a manager or vice president at a studio, I'd be worried about AI. That's who's going to replace. That's who the AI is going to replace first, or the incredibly loaded ranks of executives who you don't need anymore. But if you're a top executive, like the whole point of your day, the only fun thing about your day is calling up the writer and giving the writer notes, right? Telling the writer to do something again. Right. That's fun. That's why you're in the job. So you're not going to, you want to type that into a search box and send it to ChatGPT? That's no fun.
Well, how are the middle managers going to be eliminated by AI?
Well, because they're the studio guys who have to read scripts, and they have to come up with alternate ways to market them, and they have to give notes and they have to write summaries for their bosses, because no one of the bosses read. So they have to do something called coverage, which is really the entry-level job for a young executive. That's going to go. Why do we need that? And they're going to have to know stuff about other movies and other stories that they don't know. And their boss can do the job of 5 underlings. Again, I don't really think it's going to happen because, again, part of the fun of being a boss is you got people working for you. It's not as fun when you're just typing into a screen.
So you don't think that some studio could come along and I guess it would be violating the guild rules, but I mean, I guess you can be a non-union shop. You don't think some studio could come along and just say, okay, we're going to do an experiment and we're going to produce 5 shows and they're going to be written by AI and we'll see if you can tell the difference?
Maybe. I mean, again, it depends on the genre, I guess. Look, if I had to do 5 days in a row of daytime drama, I mean, I don't know, maybe AI will help me out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a police procedural could be written by
Yeah,
AI.
like Law and
Seriously.
Order. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're out of order, counselor. How many times you know, like
No, I mean, I'm not saying that to put it down. I just think that would be an obvious place to start.
I think that's probably true, but again, I'm not sure it's going to be easier. I guess what I should say is this. AI, I think, for the next decades at least, will be a tool that writers use and not a tool that studios use. If you're an okay writer, I think AI is going to make you probably a good writer. And if you're a good writer, I think AI is going to be a superpower. But if you're a bad writer, I think AI is going to be the end of you.
Okay, how would you use AI right now as a writer?
I don't know how to use it. I don't. I mean, I write comedy. I keep saying, show me how this thing. I'm as lazy as shit. Like, show me how this thing's going to write a joke, and I will do it. And people go, oh, it can write jokes, and I'm like, send me 2. And then they're dumb. They're like Dixie Cup jokes that I'd fire the person who pitched that joke. So they're not great. Now, maybe theoretically in the future it could, but I use it more when I'm writing prose, honestly. Like just trying to get I had to write a piece where I needed to, in the first paragraph, I need to explain just a bunch of historical things. And I tend to overwrite everything and I use a lot of M dashes, and I just, I'm ornate, and I couldn't do that. It just wasn't going to work. So I asked Chat GPT to write a very clear paragraph in short sentences describing the events of this. And boy, it was great. And it came out, it was fantastic.
Right.
And I added a little stuff to it. I addressed it, I tailored it and made it my own, as they say. But it took me 5 minutes to do that, where it would take me half a day to do it, to get out of my own way and do it.
Right. Okay. So when you're saying that AI is going to help writers, you don't mean screenwriters, television writers?
I think it might. I mean, it's hard for me to know, right? Because I wouldn't know how to do it. So to me, it seems like it can't be done. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. Maybe it can be done. I just don't know how the computer comes up with a story.
I mean, I want to talk more about AI. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm sort of starting here, because I want to have more conversations about this on this podcast, because I'm hearing from people saying you could program this thing to write an entire season and without a single human touching a keyboard.
Oh, okay.
But maybe they're catastrophists.
Yeah, or they're fantasists about.
That's a good idea for a show, actually.
The story of technology has been, it never really does that shit, right? What do the computers do? What does the internet do? It gives you cat videos and Elon Musk.
Okay.
We were, did it make it better? I don't know. I put it this way. Everyone said when YouTube happened, why would you pay somebody $1 million a year or whatever to make a TV show when you got these kids in, wherever, making these hilarious sketches for nothing, and they're monetizing their own stuff? Like, why? User generated content is gonna just destroy Hollywood. Well, it didn't do that.
Did it not do that? I want to shift a little bit and talk about who is consuming what. So we've been talking mostly about television here, but let's shift to movies for a second. Feature films. I mean, even before the pandemic, people were not going to the theater as much. So what do we know about audiences and just the sort of climate around getting a feature film made?
Well, I mean, I think feature films were in trouble. I think they still are kind of in a transition. But I don't think it's because people are consuming less entertainment. The interesting number for hours of use is like YouTube versus TikTok. When TikTok was introduced, it was like shot up with average daily use, or whatever that number is, and YouTube didn't go down. It just kind of added to everything. and I kind of feel like, well, once you start putting movies and long form entertainment and movie type entertainment on streaming service with no rating, right? So, you can show and say things on TV now that you couldn't do before. And once you do that and you're doing, kind of adult-ish drama, kind of like it does, why people go to the theater becomes a question mark, but it isn't the same thing as the Hollywood is dying. It's just delivering its material in a different way. But again, I kind of feel like that's, it's unprovable, but I remember, you do too, like every summer, there were like big summer comedies, 2 or 3 or 4 of them. Like Will Ferrell and Ben Stiller and Kevin Hart, and they were big everybody would go see Zoolander.
Yeah.
And even now people use Zoolander catchphrases, or Austin Powers still exists in people's minds, or Anchorman, like people are obsessed with Anchorman. Right?
Yeah.
And those movies made a whole lot of money, and they were great summer comedies, and they don't put them out anymore. And the question is, you have to ask yourself, is it because the audience doesn't want to go to the movie theater in the summer and see a great summer comedy? I don't know. Maybe. If Will Ferrell put out Talladega Nights again, I go see it. If that was in the theater suddenly and it was new to me, I would actually.
Well, people went to see. I mean, obviously they will go. I mean, they saw Barbie. That was kind of an anomaly, possibly.
And they saw Sound of Freedom.
Right. Yeah, I want to talk about that in a second, but I just want to make sure, because it seems to me like you've got these generations coming up and they're used to watching things on their phones.
Yeah.
So the impetus to actually go, the idea of, I can't remember the last time I heard somebody say, oh, well, you really need to see this on the big screen. I really wanted to see this on the big screen. I mean, the big screen would now mean your laptop, okay, as opposed to your phone. So, but you're saying they stopped making these movies. Like, when did they stop making them? And I mean, I'm trying to think, like, when is the last, I just felt like I got really lazy at some point, like maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I just watched I don't even have a TV. Like, I just watched stuff on my computer. I can't even be bothered to like walk into another room and turn on a TV if I had one.
Oh, you're the enemy now. No, that's like, I'm not saying that everything's going to be the same. I just sometimes feel like people in show business say, no one wants to do X or Y anymore. I'll tell you what, I mean, I remember when I was in film school, somebody came like my first month. And so they had all these inspiring characters. And I forget who this was, but some big deal guy came and said to us in the screenwriting program at UCLA, the MFA program, which is then very, very famous. Like, you guys, you're the storytellers of the future. You're the shaman around the campfire. You need to tell stories that are true to you. You got to like dig down deep into your heart and your soul and come up with the stories that people want to hear. You've got to be raw and honest and self-investigatory and incredibly personal to dig down and tell us a wonderful, wonderful story that's unique to you. And if you do that, you will be doing yourself a service and the world a service, as long as it's not a Western, because nobody wants to see Westerns. I'm not kidding. That was the kind of line. And he wasn't kidding. He's like, yeah, just don't write a Western because I can't sell those. And then like a year later, or even it was that year, like there was a big Western, and there was the Young Guns and Silverado and the Young Guns 3, and these things made hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, okay, nothing works and then it works. So I don't know, put on a Will Ferrell comedy and put it in the theaters and see what happens. If it doesn't work, then, yank it in a month and, send it back to streaming. But, Disney Pixar just released that movie Elemental, something like that. I forget what it's called. And it died. It was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it was over, dead.
Yeah.
DOA. And everybody was saying, oh my God, this is the end of Pixar. This movie is a disaster. What are they going to do? And then actually over time, people said, I should go see that movie. It's really good. The movie's going to make $1 billion. It's a giant success. Everybody thinks they know. Just, try it. I remember a network president once told me, like, he's like, we really want you to do something for us, he said. And, we're looking for kind of a new kind of comedy, because the kind of traditional comedies, they aren't working on our network. And I said, well, which ones do you have on that aren't working? And he said, well, we don't have any on. So, well, what about last year? He said, well, we haven't had them on in a few years. Okay. Well, don't you try it? I mean, why don't you try it? I don't know. Try it. See what happens. Like, everybody thinks they know. The great thing about show business is you don't have to know, because it's impossible.
All right. Well, speaking of people don't know, let's talk about Sound of Freedom. This is a movie that I suspect a lot of people listening to this podcast have not seen. I know you've written about it. I want you to sort of tell the backstory of this film and its making and its release as much as you can. I mean, we should say that this is one of the most profitable, if not the most profitable film in history at this point. It's made more than $170 million domestically alone. And this is totally outside of any kind of studio that we know of. I mean, there is a studio, but it's not the ones that we've heard of.
It sort of is and sort of isn't. So Sound of Freedom is a kind of action adventure picture about child sex trafficking. So it's like Taken, right? It's Taken, except it's not Liam Neeson, the father. It's just a disillusioned Homeland Security agent. But it's basically that. The writer is a friend of mine. He goes, it's a Rescue the Princess story. And so it's about this child sex trafficking, and then this guy rescues a little girl and finds out that her little brother is still in the ring, and he's got to go and rescue the little brother because he can't live with himself unless he does it. So he basically has to quit the bureaucratic, red tape-laden federal bureaucracy and go rogue. This it's like a little bit Taken, a little Mission Impossible, a little, it's got everything, right? And so it was inspired. The director saw, I guess it was a 60 Minutes piece a few years ago about this, and it was inspired to write an action adventure picture about it. And he and my friend partnered together to write it, and they tried and tried and tried, and they had a bunch of different versions of it. And full disclosure for me is that my friend, Rod Barr, he and I are on the board of a homeless youth agency in Hollywood called My Friend's Place, which we've been involved in for almost 20 years. And so it's kind of feels like this is a topic that we talk about at board meetings a lot, because it's, when you see homeless kids on the street in LA, that's a form of sex trafficking. That's what's happening right there, right where we live. So he's kind of already kind of into it. So he's already kind of like energized to write a story about it. But it's still a Hollywood movie. We still know it's going to be a happy ending. We still know all the things we know. And then they met a guy who did it, who it's based on. And instead of using him as a creative consultant, background guy, they decided, well, his story is actually pretty great. And so they tell a version of his story. Now they dress it up a little bit. They change some details. They make it a movie, but it's inspired by true events.
Okay. This is Tim Ballard. Tim Ballard. People know, who has a interesting background. He was with
Now
CIA.
Tim Ballard himself has an interesting background and has some Me Too issues or some other problems. Like, they made a movie.
He's not the most reliable narrator, but
right. But I mean, the things that happen in the movie, the big things that happen in the movie happen in real life. There's enough corroboration for that. But again, they're not saying it's like history. They're saying it's inspired by true events.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. It's like a movie. And so they make the movie, get the money, and they make it for 20th. And I think at the time people thought it was going to be sort of a Taken-ish thing, and it's kind of what it is. But then 20th is sold to Disney, and Disney buys it and has to digest all the unreleased, undistributed, I think even unfinished 20th projects. And then COVID hits and nobody knows what to do. And they're looking at the movie and they're saying, well, we don't know how to market this. This seems like it's a one-off kind of a picture, and it's just, it goes outside of our screen.
Wait, why don't they know how to market it if it's kind of boilerplate in the ways that you just described?
Because they don't do those movies anymore.
Okay.
Those movies don't get made. And it's just too risky, because you don't know if it doesn't really, the star was Jim Caviezel, who's not really a star. And it's like, I don't know how we can, like, it's not Liam Neeson. It's like, how are we going to get this? How do we do this? And it's just too much work. And look, the conspiracy theory on the right is always, that's because they knew that the movie had a conservative vibe to it, which is kind of not true.
Or they are pedophiles and sex traffickers.
Exactly.
They're drinking the blood of their own.
Right. Now,
as
it turns out, Jim Caviezel, the actor, kind of maybe a little QAnon-y. But I mean, look, actors with nutty crackpot beliefs are not rare in Hollywood, right?
Mel Gibson. That's
right.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise, right? I mean, like Tom Cruise. What do you like?
We don't talk about that on it.
Is Mission Impossible a Scientology movie? No, I don't think so.
Everything
Anyway.
is a Scientology movie.
That's right. Well, that's because you're a clear. You're not an operating thetan or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the movie, so Disney doesn't know what to do with it, so they get it back and they find a distributor, and then they figure out the way to do it is to distribute it in a certain way. Angel Studios is sort of a faith-based, outfit, and they release it kind of among people who are very concerned about child sex trafficking, which is a problem. Like, we have another issue in the country, which is that people believe that if I disagree with you politically, that I'm going to be reactively contradictory to whatever you think. So if you and I vote differently and I say it's going to rain tomorrow or it's raining right now, you will say, no, it's not raining right now. You just think that because you voted for Hillary, you voted for Trump, right? That's because we live in a stupidville. Anyway, so movie's basically a Rescue the Princess movie, but Jim Caviezel says some weird stuff. And then people think, is the QAnon movie? But on the other hand, it's a good movie. And a lot of people saw it. And it actually is it's a very gripping movie. Rod wrote a really good movie. And he's not a conservative. Rod is a kind of a center left progressive Catholic, and like people went to the movie theater because they wanted to see a movie in which the guy rescues the little girl and then goes back, and the rogue operating on his own, which is a great story, right? Goes and saves the little boy and makes a promise to the little girl that I will do this, and then he fulfills that promise, and the family's reunited, and you feel good. I mean, I don't know. What do you? It's like Tony Shalhoub said in Barton Fink, and he's turning to John Turturro, who's confused, and doesn't know what to write. He goes, well, "It's a wrestling picture. What do you want? A roadmap?" It's like, yeah, rescue the kid.
But do we know who is going to this movie? Because is it a phenomenon among religious people that they are going to this movie en masse, so to speak, in droves? Like, because I'm wondering if there's a parallel to, back in the 70s, we had Frank Schaeffer, who made those movies about abortion. This was covered in John Ronson's podcast about the origins of the culture wars. Things fell apart. So this incredible story about how the modern anti-abortion movement really got started because of this one guy who was growing up in this weird, L'Abri, which was this sort of religious community in Switzerland. He was an American guy. He wanted to be in Hollywood. So he ended up he got really caught up in anti-abortion activism and made this movie. I think it was called 10,000 Dolls or something. It was about it was just this very intense, weird movie about, a pro-life movie that Hollywood would not release, and it was, banned from theaters. And then because of that, it just took off, and it really was the beginning, according to, certain narratives. I'm sure it's not that simple, but it was the beginning of this kind of movement around abortion. And I wonder if there are any parallels here. It's suddenly people are talking about, has this made the sort of child sex trafficking conversation sort of less fringy? Is that part of the appeal of this movie?
Well, I mean, that would be a good thing, right? Because it is a problem.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying, yeah, but I mean, it is I feel, again, this is something I should cover more here.
Well, I actually feel like we, as a culture, we took a giant stupid pill. And so people are unable to say, oh, well, child sex trafficking is a bad thing if the QAnon people are also worried about it. Now, the QAnon people are insane, right? I mean, John F. Kennedy Jr. is not alive, and Hugo Chavez, I'm sorry, mixing the crazy 2020 election conspiracies with the crazy QAnon conspiracies, which is possible because a lot of those are the same people. But I would push back a little bit on the Ronson theory. Like, the idea that the people needed to see a movie to be against abortion is very weird, and already starts from a perspective that only the most gullible and credulous and uncritical people would ever take a pro-life position. I mean, I say that as somebody who's not pro-life, but the people I know who are pro-life didn't become because they saw a movie about it. They actually have a very strong philosophical and often uncomfortably convincing for me moral arguments that I find I turn my brain off because I agree with them, and I don't agree with them, but they're not lunatics.
Oh yeah, no, I would agree with you there. My understanding is that the abortion movement was not something that the religious community was taking up necessarily. Catholics weren't that invested in or talking about it. Certainly the religious, evangelical right was not talking about it until
movement.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting about the reaction to the movie, or what I've heard about the reaction to the movie, is people in government reminding people who, like, which happens a lot, who are exercised about this issue, that they've been working on this issue for many years. So there's a sex trafficking commission in L.A. L.A. County's got one. I think maybe it's L.A. City, and they work really hard. And so there's a bunch of people saying, "What are you guys doing about this?" And like, well, we've been working really hard on it. Nobody's been paying attention to it till now. And so maybe now they'll pay attention to it. I guess that's something that a movie can do that's positive. I don't know if we know who's seeing this movie, but it's about $200 million domestically, and it's about $200 million global, foreign. The movie's going to make $500 million probably by the end of the year, maybe more.
Yeah. No,
it's a whole lot of people. It's not just I hope it's not just I hope there aren't enough QAnon people.
Yeah, no, that would be alarming.
It's a lot of people. And I think part of the problem for people who are trying to figure out a way to not like this movie, which I understand why. I mean, everybody has that impulse. It's human. It's just kind of a picture about a guy trying to save a kid, which is, I mean, I say this to Rod all the time. Listen, 100%, you're great. You're a great writer. I really admire what you did. Big hit. But it's not like he's invented the wheel here. He made a Hollywood movie.
Well, it's also, look, I haven't seen the movie. Because I would have to go into a theater to see it. But, I've seen excerpts of it and I've seen the trailer. And, in terms of the filmmaking, it doesn't, I'm sure Rod is a great screenwriter, but like, it doesn't look like a sophisticated movie. I will just say, like, there's something about the aesthetic of it. It seems to lack a sophistication that you would expect to get from a traditional studio or something that was in release and was being reviewed and was being talked about in the culture. And I wonder if presumably you've seen the movie, and we're not here to, critique the movie, but I wonder if you have thoughts just about the sort of way that the movie is kind of translating to people.
Well, I mean, I think it's a low budget movie, so it's a $14 million movie.
Fair enough.
That has a lot of location shoots, so it doesn't have what we traditionally think of as the polish of a $200 million movie. But I think the fact that there's a giant, broad audience for it, suggests that we may be in show business, maybe spending a little too much time on our CGI.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about that. I'm not talking about slick production values. I'm talking about just a kind of artistically. I don't know. There was something about the trailer with like "My Country 'Tis of Thee" with the way the singing was. It just looked very Hallmark Hall of Fame. Let's just put it that way.
I think it has a lot of. I think it's corny. Yeah, I think that's true.
Yes,
I think
that's
probably a very, very fair argument. But I would just want to remind people in show business that you could be too cool for school. And if you're wondering why your comedies and your dramas on TV and the movies are declining, maybe it's because you think your audience is stupid, and they know it, and they don't want to be called stupid. But it's still a movie. And like, as a Fran Lebowitz once said, like, here's how you know movies are not an art form, because they show them in a place that sells Orange Crush and Jujubes. And I was like, I think everybody who makes movies should just get the stick out of their ass a little bit and make a fun movie, and it'd be remarkable. I mean, what if people went into the office to writing a comedy show, and just were going to try to be funny, not going to try to like teach you a lesson or be a quasi therapist, but just
be transgressive.
Just be funny. Just be funny. I don't know. Maybe we'd get the audience back. Because right now, like, there's a resurgence, there's a renaissance in comedy clubs, which were so incredibly, like, for 20 years after the 90s, they were like, we all got sick of them, and then they kind of died. Like, comedy club? Are you kidding me? Now it's if you want to see something genuinely funny and transgressive and different and like maybe a little naughty, that's where you got to go.
For sure. Yes. So before you go, I want to talk with you about your first job. You were, I think, 24 when you got hired on Cheers.
24, yeah.
Speaking of like old-fashioned funny comedy, how in the world did you manage that?
Well, I mean, I managed it by being exactly in the right place at exactly the right time, basically. I mean, I was as I said, I was in UCLA in film school, and I wrote a script for something in this writing workshop I was in. You had to read some of your work, and then you sort of look up, and your colleagues ask you questions about it. And so one woman was in my class, and she kind of pointed to it, like, kind of lip curled in distaste, and said, "This just feels like television," she said. Which I did not know at the time it was supposed to be an insult, but at the time I thought, oh, yeah, you're right.
This was the 80s, presumably?
This was like 1988. And so I thought, okay, well, let's move to TV. So I had a friend of mine I had written some plays with in college, and he was working in New York, and I just gotten out of college. He was a couple years older than me. And we wrote a couple specs, and then somebody said, here's what you do. And they just explained to me, which nobody knew at the time. Now, of course, every college campus, their kids writing spec this, spec that. They all know about show business. But then nobody knew. You write a couple specs and you find a couple agents who represent writers that you like, that have a kind of a career that you want, like, or young writers on shows that you like. And you used to be able to call the Writers Guild. One certain number you could call them, and they would, and you give them 3. You could only ask for it's called the agency department. You could ask for the agents for 3 writers, only 3 per call. And you had to hang up and call back. Seriously, this is like,
wait, what? Wait. So if you wanted to reach a writer, or you wanted to reach the agent, who are you trying to reach?
You want to reach the agent. So what you do is you watch TV and you watch the shows that you like. It still kind of can work this way, by the way. You watch the shows that you like, and then you write down the names. And back then, we didn't have TiVo. You had to write down the names of the writers that are at the level that you kind of are, but not the executive producer creator, but the story editor and the executive script consultant on the low level. And then you call the Writers Guild, find out who those agents are. And then you send those agents directly a letter and you say, hey, here's who we are. We're really bright and we wrote the spec. Would you read it? And most of them just don't even respond because they're agents and they're lazy. And then 3 of them said, yeah, I'll read it. And then 2 of the 3, 2 just kind of didn't read it. Or 1 read it overnight and then sent it back and said, thanks, no thanks. And then 1 read it and then didn't say anything. And then 1 read it and I had to call her. And then she said, yeah, I read it. It's great. Get in here. And so we signed that day. And then a month later, she was an agent partner at a small boutique agency. It was very powerful at the time. This is before CAA was giant and all these names were, these names didn't exist. Everything was small. And they represented Cheers and a bunch of other TV shows. And she said, okay, go. The guys at Cheers want you to go and pitch a couple episodes to them because they have room in their budget for a staff writer, she said. And so we went and we pitched 3 terrible ideas that were terrible.
Do you remember what they were?
I think one of them was like, someone discovers that there's nude pictures of Sam Malone. It's like,
I bet a lot of ladies would have liked that.
That's what I thought.
A lot of people would have liked that.
I don't know. But whatever we did was dumb. And they said, these are terrible ideas, but your guys are kind of funny. We like you. You seem personable. So here's a story we've been working on. You go and write an outline for it and bring it back. And so we went and we got hired to write a script. And so we went away, we wrote an outline, we brought it back, and they said, this is a pretty good outline. Some really bad jokes in here. You need to work on that. And then we were in. That's how it worked.
Would anything work that way now? Presumably
Not
they told you to write a
chance.
script, but so did they? But they paid you to write the script. So presumably they couldn't have gotten away with just like do free labor.
Oh,
for us.
no. They said, this is the script. This is the story we've been working on. We want you guys to write it. And so we wrote I'm sure it was a good outline for people who had never written an outline before. But I think had our second outline been that quality, I think they would have fired us. Because the thing is, you can learn. You can't learn talent, right? You can either write jokes or not.
Yeah.
But you can learn craft, and that's the one thing you got to learn fast.
Right. So so you say that would never happen now. Give us a few reasons why.
First of all, there are too many shows on, and there are no shows that last 10, 11, 12 years like Cheers. So when we joined the show, it was already in its 7th season, I think. So it's like it already was a machine. So we couldn't break the machine. What they needed was exactly what we were offering, which is like fresh, young, energetic, wide-eyed, energy. It was a room where the room had been constructed, and all these rooms were like that then, where you had a couple of old guys who would come in 1 day a week who were just too rich to come in every day. They weren't going to come in every day. They come in every, 1 day a week, and they would consult, but basically they were just kind of there, and they would pitch jokes, and they would fix stories, and they would do a lot of great stuff, but also they were there kind of like for continuity's sake, that this show was going to be a Cheers episode from the start to the finish in all of its production was going to resemble kind of the way they did the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Right.
Run through.
Were these the guys, Charles, what their names were like first on the credits? Was it? It was like
Glenn,
something.
Glenn and Les Charles were brothers, and they had started, I think, on the old Bob Newhart show, or maybe they wrote a Mary Tyler Moore show, and then Taxi, and then Cheers. And the director was Jim Burrows, who was their third partner. And Jimmy was a stage manager, which they still had stage manager at the Mary Tyler Moore Show. And then he was a director on the Bob Newhart Show and directed Taxi.
Oh, I love Taxi.
Yeah, Taxi's a great show, right? So
I think that's my favorite sitcom ever.
I think it's a great show. I mean, Taxi is a great show. But again, it's like these things, if you don't have a system that works that way, how do you I hear, I hear like these shows, shows don't work that way anymore, which is really too bad.
But what was the climate like in the writer's room? Because what we hear now is people are afraid to pitch jokes, or, I mean, this is a whole other discussion we don't have to get into, but like, we've got these diversity, we got these inclusivity hires, and only certain people can say certain things. And there's a kind of people are throttling themselves. I mean, in the writer's room at that time, presumably it was a bunch of white guys. So be that as it may, was it just kind of more freewheeling, and was the creativity level was it easier to be creative?
No, I mean, I think the rule was you had to be funny. And, the bottom line you discover pretty much your first day is if you pitch a joke and no one laughs, it's not because they didn't hear it. Well, don't say it again louder. Like the lack of response to it is also a response. So I genuinely love the idea of having a noisier, more diverse, more kind of reflective, kind of off the wall writing staff. I think the shows could be much, much better. I mean, it is true. They were all, we weren't all men, there were women on staff, but, predominantly male, predominantly Jewish, predominantly, comedy writers. What do you think? And I think it's better to have a bunch of different people in there, but it's still a comedy writer's room. And so everyone's going to put on their big boy pants and, it's not a place you can go if you're sensitive, not just because people are going to be mean to you, because they really aren't, although there's a lot of teasing. It's just that it's a tough atmosphere. You're trying to make the funniest people you've ever met think that you're funny. And that's a hard thing to do. And you're already kind of weird because you write comedy. No, those are not normal jobs. So, yeah, so it can be tough. But there is a part of it. The thing is that there's a little kind of Children of the Corn vibe to some of these shows where everyone's young and no one's done it before, or they've done it. They did 6 episodes of some other bullshit show that nobody watched. So there's no old guys like we had to say, yeah, this is a dumb idea. You don't say things they can yell at the showrunner. I mean, remember the first day, one of our consultants, who was a legendary writer, was looking at the showrunners, who are my bosses, saying, this is the stupidest story I've ever read. What are you doing? This is crazy. None of this makes any sense. They're okay, well, all right. Crotchety old man, but he's not wrong. We got to fix it. There's nobody like that anymore. Some of these shows, it's just everybody running the show is some version of King Joffrey. You got to be careful of that.
What shows do you like now?
I don't watch enough. I have this weird thing. I got a Criterion channel membership. So every time I go to watch something, I'm like, well, what's on Criterion first? And then there's always some weird thing I want to watch. I think Abbott Elementary is a terrific show. I think it's really funny. And I
have not seen that.
It's really good.
Heard of it.
It's really good. And that is a perfect example. What happens when you open the business up a little bit. You end up getting really, really, really funny, specific shows that are still shows. Like it's a set in a school. Okay, so it's Welcome Back Kotter, right? They didn't break any new ground. It just it's a kind of different set of voices, a different set of priorities, different kind of storytelling, but it's it's a school show. What do you want? So there's a couple other, I'm just trying to think of the ones that I just really love. I mean, I'm also love all spy things, so I'm super into Slow Horses. I love that, and I'm a Francophile, so I've been watching Lupin too, which I think is just the 3rd season's out now. So that's kind of it. My problem with TV, the new modern TV, is it's all so complicated. If you can get through the finding it, then you discover that it's 11 episodes, they're all connected, and you got to watch them all. And then somebody tells you some bullshit thing, which always drives me crazy. Oh yeah, the first 4 are really slow. And then the fifth one gets really good. Like, what the hell?
It doesn't get good to the last episode.
Yeah, then
Totally
it all makes sense to you. Yeah, like if you're bored and confused, you're supposed to be, which is not the way it's supposed to work. Or like I've even heard people say, "Oh yeah, the first 2 seasons are not really great. The third season, third season? What do you think? This is like a job? I have a job."
I felt that way about Succession. I couldn't stand it until the third season. But muddled through.
I'm out. No, I will not give people that much time. Like, who knows how much time? I don't know how many summers I have left, Megan. So, like, what am I going to waste them on the first 2 seasons of some dumb show because the third season's good? No.
Yeah, I don't know what got into me. I think part of it, I had COVID or something. Had time
that
to
could
kill,
be
but,
it.
but
you were ill.
Yeah.
Don't blame yourself. But like the first rule of show business is do not give the audience homework. Nobody pays for homework.
Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody trying to get in the business now? It's hard because it's a totally different set of rules. So people ask me like, oh, how do I get it? Tell me, what did you do? And like what I did is completely irrelevant to what people need to do now.
How do I get into book writing?
Yeah, I know.
I don't know. Like, I think I just actually spoke to a class at NYU here and they said this sort of question came up. And I was like, well, I mean, you got to think really hard about what your superpower is. Like, who are you and what do you really care about? And what makes you, I only know comedies. Like, what makes you laugh? Like, what makes you excited? What makes you thrilled? And then figure out what story you have to tell that's different and special and interesting and will break through all the other crap that everyone else is telling. That a story that only you can tell. And focus really on what makes you special and cool and interesting and what gets you out of bed in the morning and what you find you're obsessed with. And don't think at all about what you think the business needs, what you think that they're not doing anymore they need to do, or what you think the audience is missing, or what you think you need to teach the audience. Just forget all of that. Just focus only on what's great about you and what is your special thing that makes you interesting and makes people want to hear your story. And then figure out a way to write it. And if you're smart, you'll figure out a way to write it as a comedy. Just don't write it as a Western because nobody buys Westerns.
Okay. That's good. That applies for everything. I think no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, that's somebody
accounting, just don't do a Western. Yeah. Just don't.
But the thing is, if it is a Western, you should do it as a Western because the worst thing that happens is you don't do it as a Western, and then 9 months later, somebody does exactly that as a Western, and there's a huge hit, and you're like, but I could have done that. Why did I listen? And that's ultimately the big tragedy of show business. It's not that you don't make it; it's that you don't do the thing that you wanted to do, and then you see that movie in the movie theater or on TV. And it's like that, I was going to do that. And then I thought no one would want it.
All right. That's very good advice. Where do you think the industry is going to be in 5 years? It's my last question, I promise.
Okay. Optimistically, I think what's going to happen is it's all going to explode into a bunch of little pieces. And that's going to be great because show business works better from a lot of little pieces. A lot of little companies banding together, pooling their money together, making projects. That's all good. The upside of that is that more opportunity. Downside of that is that the agents will be in charge, but that's okay too because the agents are good. They're useful bacteria, I call them. They're like, the probiotics of Hollywood.
Useful bacteria. Them. I like the other thing I want to. I loved that you wrote that a bunch of deer is a herd of deer, a bunch of lions is a pride of lions, a bunch of crows is a murder of crows, and what is a bunch of writers?
A complaint of writers.
Brilliant.
And a bunch of actors is an equinox of actors.
A juice fast of actors?
Exactly, right. Yeah. A sweet green of actors.
All right, Rob, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate it.
A lot of fun. Thanks.
That was my conversation with television writer and producer and also entertainment business commentator Rob Long. You can read Rob in Commentary and hear him on Martini Shot, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts, and especially on The Ankler at theankler.com. Quick clarification. When we were talking about Frank Schaeffer and his abortion movie, which was covered on John Ronson's Things Fell Apart podcast, I conflated a couple of things. 1,000 Dolls was the name of the episode of Things Fell Apart that talked about the influence of Schaeffer's documentary series, How Should We Then Live? I said 10,000 Dolls, which is not the name of anything. Thank God, because I don't like dolls, and 10,000 of them is disturbing. I highly recommend that podcast, by the way, and you can listen to John Ronson talking about it on this podcast. It's the September 4th 2022 episode. Anyway, what else do you need to know? If you are a paying subscriber and you are wondering where the bonus content is, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going to give you guys entirely separate bonus episodes a couple times a month rather than having the guest stay overtime necessarily. It's sometimes hard to get guests to stay overtime. So I'm going to try it this way. If you are not yet a paying subscriber, become one at meghandaum.substack.com. Lots of great stuff there. If you're interested in the Unspeakeasy, my viewpoint diversity community for women, we have just announced some of our 2024 retreats. So go to theunspeakeasy.com and find out about them. I will be back next week with another super nuanced guest. Thanks for listening. See you then.